Have my presentation up. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Colleen Evans. I'm Director of Natural Sciences at the Staten Island Museum. And today we're going to talk about hurricanes. But I'm calling this, rather than a lunch and learn, I'm going to call this a collection story and public service announcement. Because that's what we're going to do. Because we're going to start in 2019 in the attic of the museum. So this is probably May or June of 2019. So that's when I started working at the Staten Island Museum. And this is what the attic looked like. And I specifically want to draw attention to this little thing here, this big old stump. So this stump and we had a disagreement in its existence for a very long time. Apparently it used to live under the eaves, so nobody knew what it was or what it meant. But at some point it got moved into the aisles. And so I was constantly tripping over this ding dang stump that was behind me or in front of me all the time. I was constantly moving it and I didn't know what it was. It was just like this weird stump that was in the collection. And then one day I realized, camouflaged onto it, nailed in with some rusty old nails, was a tag. And I was like, maybe this weird stump is actually something. And so I read the tag and it says Staghorn sumac, 2 feet 2 inches in circumference, standing at 146 Stuyvesant Place, St. George, Staten Island, New York, until it was blown down in the storm of August 23rd, 1933. William T. Davis. Now, 146 Stuyvesant Place was William T. Davis's home. So that was where a lot of like the city offices are now, on Stuyvesant Place. That's where his house used to be. It's obviously been torn down. And obviously his tree is no longer there because it got blown down. And so I kind of just like filed this away in my brain of like, okay, so this stump is maybe something. Apparently there was a storm, but I didn't look into it any further at the time. I was just like, okay, there was a storm on August 23rd, 1933, and it blew down a tree he really liked. And poor William T. Davis, he must have really loved this tree. And then we get to 2020 and it's hurricane season. So it's, hurricane season runs from June to November. And I'm in the shower, or I was up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, all the weird times when I'm doing my best thinking. And I realized that, August 23rd, that's like the middle of hurricane season. And so I was like, what if that was a hurricane or a tropical storm that blew down his beloved sumac tree? So I looked it up, went to the Googles, and sure enough, hurricane number 6 landed on the North Carolina coast on August 23rd, 1933. It was a Category 4 storm. It made its way up the eastern seaboard, did a ton of damage. And I was like, oh, okay. And so this was called the Chesapeake Potomac hurricane. This was prior to when we named hurricanes. We didn't start giving hurricanes human names until the 1950s. Before then, the only storms that get names are ones that did a lot of damage. And it was usually named after whatever region it happened to hit. So there's just a couple of pictures of some of the damage caused by this particular storm. So this is from the Library of Congress. So you can see the one on the left has the Washington Monument in the background. So that's some flooding out in DC. And then there's also the one on the right is a park somewhere in DC. So there was a 7-foot storm surge that went into Virginia and DC. It did $17 million worth of damage in 1933 dollars. So we would have to assume that would be tens of billions of dollars if a similar storm were to hit that region today, just due to sea level rise and increased population density on the coastlines. And there were 47 fatalities from that particular storm. But to bring us back to Staten Island, so here's our little route again, and I've circled Staten Island with a little red circle. So we got hit by the right side of the storm. So we didn't like take the eye of the storm or anything. And it was a slightly weaker storm, probably by the time it hit us. It was probably back to being like a tropical storm and not actually hurricane strength. But we did get the right side of the storm. And the way that hurricanes spin, the right side of any particular storm, so anything to the east, tends to have more damage and higher winds than anything to the western side or the left side of the storm, just because of the way that they spin. And so we got some of the strongest winds and rains that would have been associated with this particular storm. And it was significant enough that William T. Davis, in his nature notes for 1933 in the Staten Island proceedings, wrote all about this particular storm. So the storm of August 23rd, 1933 was of wide range along the coast and did considerable harm. Many trees on the island were felled by the wind and houses and boats were damaged. The large elm, 15 feet in circumference on the one-time Captain Kettle's place on the Old Town Road, was blown down. And at 146 Stuyvesant Place, St. George, the large staghorn sumac, 2 feet 2 inches in circumference, was destroyed. And then he goes on to talk about how like a bunch of mussels blew up onto the shoreline. And so people were like eating a ton of mussels and clams and things like that, which is also kind of interesting. But then he also continued on that August 1933 was recorded by the New York Sun of September 6 as producing a record number of tropical gales. And the New York Times of September 28 printed hurricanes this year likely to set a record. And that's true. So 1933 had 20 documented tropical storms, 11 of which attained hurricane status, and 6 of those were major hurricanes. And 1933 held the record for most tropical storms recorded until 2005. So it was a very, very active hurricane season. And at this point, it's ranked 3rd in terms of hurricane seasons that we have record of. And so ahead of it are 2020, which we had 30 storms last year, and then 2005 when there were 28. And we also kind of can't compare them like apples to apples necessarily, because 1933, we didn't have as much technology tracking storms at the time. So there were no satellites. Those didn't really come into existence until the 1960s. There wasn't a lot of monitoring aircraft going on in the 1930s. So we actually have to assume that there were a lot more storms than we actually recorded. It's kind of like, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, did it actually fall? So like if a hurricane happens in the Atlantic, but nobody sees it, did it even happen? And so with nothing really able to track them, we don't know. So we do have to assume that there were probably more storms than we managed to record that year. But why was 1933 in particular so active? So there are 2 reasons. One is warmer ocean temperatures. So this is a well-known phenomenon that whenever the Atlantic Ocean is particularly warm, you have more storms and you have stronger storms in terms of tropical storms. And there was also a weak La Nina event that year. So El Nino and La Nina is a cyclical pattern that happens in the Pacific. So El Nino events means that there's warmer ocean waters in the Pacific, and that can have a lot of cascading weather effects. And then same with La Nina. La Nina is the opposite. So it's slightly cooler, and that also has cascading weather effects. And so when there's a La Nina event, there's less wind shear, and wind shear will affect the entire planet. And there's less wind breaking up storms in the Atlantic if there's a La Nina event. And so you have these 2 conflicting factors. We've got a lot of storms being built and nothing blowing them away necessarily. And that can kind of give us a window into what's happening now. So hurricanes are getting worse. So that is a fact. That's not just something that we're imagining. Hurricanes are getting worse over the past several decades. And there are several reasons for that. One is higher air temperatures. So as the climate's warming, as our planet is warming, the air is warmer, and warmer air can hold a lot more water in it. And so storms have a lot more rain in them than they used to. We also have increased ocean temperatures just in general. So like in 1933, that was just an unusually warm year. At this point, we're just always having warmer years in the Atlantic Ocean. And so that creates more and stronger storms. We also have higher sea levels than we used to. So as these glaciers are melting, because the air temperature is higher, our sea levels are getting higher. And so storm surges are larger, and they're impacting places they used to not impact. So you have more water moving inland and further inland than it used to. And then the 4th one, and we really don't know why this is happening, but storms are stalling more often. So they're traveling much more slowly through regions, and they're more likely to stop and stall over a region. And so now they're dumping all this extra moisture that they have over a very concentrated area, as opposed to moving through very quickly like they used to. And scientists don't really know why this one's happening, but over like the last decade, there's been a lot more storms that have stalled. And we also know that storms are getting more expensive. And so this was a study that came out within the last month, that Hurricane Sandy in particular, there was $8.1 billion worth of damage that can be attributed to just climate-mediated anthropogenic sea level rise and the extension of the floodplain to affect more people. And so Sandy was more impactful than it might have been at previous times, just due to the fact that sea levels are higher and there's more people packed in to where the storm surge can get to. And this just kind of brings me to an interesting quote I found from a man who's considered the father of floodplain management, which I did not know was a thing. But I found this quote kind of interesting. So he said that floods are acts of God, but flood losses are largely acts of man. And so floods are going to happen, right? Like there's not a whole lot we can do to stop floods from happening, either from hurricanes or other weather events. But flood losses are oftentimes our own fault, because we do things like build houses where we shouldn't. So this is an image from the Houston suburbs after Hurricane Harvey. So Houston in particular has been very bad about this, but this is true throughout the United States. We keep putting
large, dense neighborhoods into places that are known to flood. So in either past floodplains or what should still now be considered a floodplain because sea levels are higher. And we haven't really updated all of our flood maps. So we keep putting neighborhoods in places, we put businesses in places that are likely to flood, and then get very upset that our homes are flooded, but we should expect that to happen because we put our homes where we shouldn't. And we also are doing things like destroying our buffers. So there's a lot of natural landscape buffers that exist that could help mitigate hurricane damage or other storm damages, but we keep destroying them. So this is true throughout the eastern seaboard. We don't have a lot of wetland habitat anymore. Wetlands are really great at absorbing storm surge and excess floodwaters. And so they can absorb all of that extra water. And so then it's not necessarily flooding your homes. And so, and this is particularly true on somewhere like Staten Island, where it's like Fresh Kills used to be a marshland and we filled it in with garbage. And so this wonderful habitat that used to be able to absorb a lot of extra water if we were hit, say, by a large storm, it's not there anymore. And there's also things like, dune habitats or barrier islands are really good at absorbing wave energy to keep a lot of waves from actually making it further inland. But we do things like now build giant multi-million-dollar mansions on barrier islands and then cover it with all these impervious surfaces, and then nothing's there to absorb anything anymore. So we're kind of making our own bed in some ways in terms of storm damages in places. And so this is my PSA. Because I'm a bit of a nut about making sure people are prepared. I've almost always lived in places that get hit by hurricanes. And one of the most important things you can do, because there's not a whole lot we can do to change the fact that maybe your home is now in a floodplain and things like that. There's not a whole lot we can do about that in the immediate future. One thing we can do is at least be prepared, knowing that a storm might be coming. And so it is currently hurricane season. It is June. And so now is the time you should be thinking about what supplies you have on hand. And you shouldn't be waiting until the day or two before a hurricane actually hits, because as anybody who has ever been to the grocery store, like 2 days before a hurricane or a tropical storm is predicted to hit, there's nothing there anymore. There's no water, there's no bread, there's no nothing. And so now is the time to make sure you have potable water in your house, that you've got batteries, that you have extra medications. If you've got pets and children, that you have supplies for them. So like extra diapers, extra pet food, all of those kind of things that you may need to survive several days in the event that a hurricane hits. It's also a good time to buy yourself a generator. Don't wait until you've lost power, because then it's not going to exist. But yeah, so that's Colleen's PSAs. Please just make sure you're prepared. Put all your documents in a little Ziploc baggie. That's what we do. And then we have a little go bag and we just throw it all in the bag if we needed to evacuate. And know your evacuation route before you go. But yeah, and that is it. That is Colleen's PSA. So coming up at the Staten Island Museum, we have 2 major events coming up. The first is this Saturday. There is the Juneteenth Freedom Festival here at Snug Harbor. So that is a site-wide event. The museum will be open and will be free that day, so there's free admission. Gabriella Leone, our archivist, will be on site to do tours of Women of the Nation Arise. This is the last weekend that exhibit will be on view. Also, Debbie Ann Page will be on site doing presentations about her Staten Island African American Heritage Tour app, which is very cool. And then since this is the last weekend for Women of the Nation Arise, it means a new exhibit is coming. And so on July 10th, Magic Cicada by Jennifer Angus will be opening. So that'll be the first day you could see that. That is going to be amazing. She's a textile artist. She uses pinned insects and she creates these amazing patterns and colors on walls and other surfaces. She also builds like these amazing dioramas. And so that'll all be on view starting July 10th. And then check out our website for the other cool summer programming that's upcoming. We've got Moth Night, we've got Summer Nights, there's all kinds of things happening. But yeah, so thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions about hurricanes or other things.
Thank you so much, Colleen. That was incredible and has me thinking about evacuation plans. I thought about go bags, but I don't know my route. So that is something I will be looking into. Karen, I saw that you unmuted. Did you have a question?
Yeah. Well, I was wondering about some of the information that Colleen had. That was from NOAA and National Weather Service, with the map with the spaghetti. Yeah. I looked at the map and there were a couple of things. Of course, I just saw quickly. There were a couple of things that looked like it might have been one storm that kind of died down and then popped up again. There's nothing time related in that. So, yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah. There's one that kind of goes. It seems to be going like again, you can't really tell the direction.
Yeah.
Is wandering around down by Central America, comes upward and heads east. And then there's a gap. And then there's another one right out there, kind of in the middle of the Atlantic, the short one.
This one?
That one. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And just to the left of it, there's that other one that's either beginning or ending. And I'm wondering if those two were connected.
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay. Because I mean, there's nothing in time.
Pretty good at keeping. So when like they do hurricane maps like this, they're usually pretty good about keeping a storm together.
Yeah.
And it's not that unusual to have like a really short-lived tropical gale that happens like way out in the Atlantic. I'm actually surprised, just based on like 1933 technology, that they even tracked this one at all.
Yes.
Because that's like not anywhere near any sort of land. There were probably ships or something that were out there.
It would have come from ships observing.
Yeah.
Because there would be a lot more shipping than there is now.
Right.
And the reason
so probably some poor container ship got caught up in that or something.
Yes, well, it wasn't a container ship yet in 33, but some ship with a bunch of cargo saw it and would have
and it could have gone longer.
Telegraph to notify the National Weather Service or whatever. I think they were called the National Weather Service by then. And the other question I have is the warmer temperature of the water. Were they monitoring it then? Because
yes,
they were. Okay.
Yeah. Not necessarily to the extent they are now, but they were monitoring like water temperatures and air temperatures. We have pretty good records, even dating back farther than that.
Yeah, obviously they didn't have all the technology that we have for that now.
Right.
But they were getting that directly. That's not something that's been historically recreated.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so like we knew that at the time, that for whatever reason they were having an unusually warm year. Now the La Nina thing, that's from more recent research.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm sure like they had the temperatures and stuff, and that's how they were able to decide that there was a weak La Nina event. I'm not even sure if they called them El Nino and La Nina.
I don't think on that one they did.
I don't think so. I feel like that's a newer phenomenon.
But they would have, if they would have
phenomenon itself, but calling it that.
Yeah, if they had the water temperature data for all these storms that are happening here, then somebody would have had the water temperatures for the Pacific, and looking back at it, you'd say, "Oh, look, there was a La Nina. Here's an El Nino," and they didn't call it that then, but you see it and you say, "Oh, that's what it was."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to my cool picture.
Back to your yes.
It's back to my happy beetle. But
your happy beetles.
Yeah.
I saw all your bugs that you posted from the walk.
Yeah.
On iNaturalist. I haven't got mine up yet. But
I was gonna say I haven't seen yours yet.
I know, because I went on another walk the next day, so I've got like 100 photographs of various things that have to get sorted out and paired up and put on iNaturalist. Yeah. But they will be there.
Yeah.
Do we have?
So I don't know if we have other questions, but. No.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you so much.
Colleen.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Definitely.
I was talking about hurricanes, so.
Oh yeah, hey. I was a Red Cross volunteer here in the city in 2005, and the Red Cross had just decided that in order to get the maximum bang for their buck from their volunteers without having to ship them all around the country. I mean, some do because they do need people boots on the ground, but they could upgrade their call center by having a distributed call center where people from, I think originally they started a dozen chapters around the country, could hook into the call center from whatever chapter they were in. So you wouldn't have to deploy anywhere. You could keep doing your day job and you could just go, after work or, on the weekends or whatever. And I signed up for training. They offered 4 training dates. The first one I was busy for. The second one I signed up for, it was August 29th of 2005 at 6 p.m. 12 hours before Hurricane Katrina made landfall in Louisiana. Yeah. We spent Saturday mornings and 2 evenings a week on the call center until late October. So I'm well acquainted with hurricanes, aside from, you know, Hurricane Sandy. Then in 2019, in 2012, Hurricane Sandy filled our basement, and thankfully not more than that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Colleen, if you've ever come across, I do live in Oakwood.
Okay.
Not close enough to have gotten a buyout,
Right.
but close enough to have kind of wished that we did.
Yeah. Like I knew you were somewhere on the South Shore. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm above Mill Road, but yeah.
Yeah.
And I grew up knowing a couple of people who lived in Oakwood Beach, who fortunately I think by then had left.
Yeah.
Related to my best friend who lived down the street from me. But yeah, hurricanes are kind of my jam.
They're fascinating. They really are.
They are. And in a way, now that we have the satellites and everything, they are kind of beautiful in a way.
Yeah.
A really nice, you know, preferably
There's something very pleasing about how like perfect they look.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
A nice clear eye and the spirals coming out, and preferably like out over the ocean where they're not,
Yes.
you know,
Far away from
any harm. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Colleen, and thank you, Karen and Susan, for joining us today.
Thank you
And
very
we
much.
hope to see you at an in-person program throughout the summer. We will be resuming Lunch and Learns again in the fall,
Okay.
but we hope to see you before then. So thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.